So by the time I was 32 years old, I moved into leadership. I had already had 7 different managers. And they were good. They weren't phenomenal. But I learned from them how to be a leader. But it's not what I wanted to be. And I said, what I really need to do is look at it from a different lens, a different perception of how to lead. Because I really didn't know how. So the first question I asked is, how can I be a better leader? How can I be amazing? How can I be better than anything I've had? Because I want to be inspired the way I was not inspired. And so when I thought about this, how could I do this? The first person that came to mind was Shirley. Shirley was an actress. She was a business owner. She was my mother. And at a very young age, I realized my mom was something different. See, everything my mom did, she always said, how can I get better at it? She had this desire to get better. So as an actress, it was, how do I become the best? She got to the point where she was offered roles and to be able to go to Hollywood and to go to Broadway. Because of life circumstance, she had to turn that down. But anything she did, if she designed costumes, that's my dad. She made a costume for him to look like Yul Brynner from The King and I. If she was making a cheesecake, it was famous. It was Shirley's famous cheesecake, where anyone that ever ate this said, oh my gosh, this is the greatest cheesecake I've ever had in my life. And if she made a drink, a martini, it was always the best. Why? Because she learned it's stirred, not shaken, and it's 47 stirs exactly. And I said, Mom, why is it 47? She says, 46 is not enough, and 48 is too many. That was my mom. And everything that guided her life, as I look back at it, and I say, oh my gosh, everything my mom did was started with the words, how can I? Can all of you say, how can I? Nice and loud. Ready? Fantastic. So 1958, my mom was working for United Airlines at the time. We live in Colorado, and her parents wanted to go travel to see their son who was living in California. Her parents had never been on an airplane in their life. So they were really nervous about it. And so they asked my mom and they said, you know, hey, look, we've never traveled before, we're gonna drive. And my mom says, look, I work for United, I've traveled the world, just fly. They said, no, we're really nervous. She said, Mom, Dad, it's easy. There's nothing to worry about. Flying is like sitting in a chair in your living room. So they get on the airplane, they fly to California for the first time ever in an airplane. And on their flight back, things didn't go quite as planned. While they were flying over Las Vegas, at the same time, there was a US Air Force doing flight maneuvers, and they were doing diving maneuvers, where they go up really high, they drive down, and the jet ran into the United Airlines flight 736, and there were no survivors from either flight. My mom was devastated, obviously. How can I possibly go on? How can I live with this guilt? How can I ever travel again? It's my job to try, like, how can I do it? And then something clicked, she told me. And she said, and then I realized, how can I move on? How can I go forward? How can I live without feeling guilty? And she did. She continued to travel the world. She's continued to live without guilt of that event the rest of her life. Now, she married my dad about a year later. My dad was, he looks like Yul Brynner if you look at the picture there. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had owned a fried chicken business before I was born, and then he bought a printing franchise. Now, in order to buy the printing franchise, he had to leverage the house. We didn't have a lot of money. So, you know, he does a mortgage, he has credit cards, and he leverages the entire house. And he's running this business. Well, my dad would come home from work and he would say, you know, my back is just really hurting. And so we'd give him a massage, he'd go to a chiropractor, he'd go to the doctor, they couldn't find anything wrong. The pain continued to get worse and worse and worse. Till finally they said, all right, we don't know what's going on, we're gonna have to operate. They cut him open, they do a biopsy, and they learn that he has pancreatic cancer, stage 4. They gave him 6 months to live, and he passed in 3 months. So here's my mom, 3 young kids, a mound of debt, and she says, how can I possibly go on? How can I possibly raise these kids by myself? How can I pay off the debt? How can I? And then she said, how can I? Everyone say it. And she found a way to take over the business, run it profitably for 20 years, raise 3 kids on her own, sends me to college, and it's remarkable that I'm where I'm at today. And it's all because of my mom's attitude. So as I moved into leadership roles over the years, I looked at it and I said, how can I? How can I be an amazing leader? How can I change my life? I have no excuses. If my mom can do it with the adversity she had, why can't I? And it all started with that question of how can I? So when I said, how can I? Here's my answer. I have no clue. I had no idea how to be a better manager than the managers I had. All I knew was to do what they had done. All I knew. So I said, who do I know that's amazing? Who could I copy? Who do I admire? And when I was 23 years old, I had met Mary. Mary was one of the most amazing leaders I've ever met in my entire life, even up till today. At 23 years old, she got promoted into her first management job. She had inherited a team very diverse of age, gender, social status, single parents, etc. And she comes into this organization, and in a very short amount of time, they become the #1 performing team in the city. Everyone wanted to work for Mary. They would do anything for Mary. They stopped calling in sick. They stopped fighting. They stopped excuses, and they just would do anything for her. And everyone that heard about Mary wanted to be on Mary's team. You got to go work for Mary. Oh my gosh, she's amazing. So the regional office gets wind of this, and they said, we have another location that is really struggling. Mary, would you be willing to go to a new location and see if you can turn things around? They move her to another location, and in a very short amount of time, that becomes the #1 performing team in the city. And again, everyone wants to work for Mary. Everyone loves Mary. They will do anything for Mary. They don't call in sick. They'll do anything. So the regional office comes to her again. Mary, we got another office struggling. Can we move you? They move her again. And it becomes #1. Same results over and over. Fast forward, she's 28 years old. New organization. Union employees. She's a manager. She comes in this new organization. There's one gentleman had been there at the company 30, 35 years, ready to retire. His attitude is, hey, I don't need a 28-year-old punk telling me how to do my job. What does she know? They become #1, high performing. Everyone wants to work for Mary. They'll do anything for Mary. Even though they're union, they will work overtime, and they're not supposed to, but they would do anything for Mary. And the old curmudgeon writes a letter to the corporate office, which is here in Texas, of a large corporation, and says, Mary is the best manager I've ever had in 30, 35 years at this company. And again, the accolades roll in. So knowing these stories, when I got promoted and I said, how can I be better? I turned to Mary and I said, Mary, what is your secret? What books have you read? What training have you done that have made you such an incredible leader? And you know what she says to me? Nothing. What? You've never read a book on leadership? No. You've never had training on how to do what you do? No. How is this possible? She thought about it and she said, if I had to boil it down to one word, David, my secret is empathy. And I said, empathy? Quick question for you all. Raise your hand. How would you define empathy? I want to get a couple quick answers here. Don't be shy. I'll shout it. I'll say it loud. But what is the definition of empathy? Yeah. Say again? Thinking of others first. Thank you. What else? Compassion. What else? Putting yourself in their shoes. That's exactly what I said. I said, Mary, so empathy is just putting yourself in their shoes. And Mary says, no. What? What do you mean? No, that's empathy. Empathy is putting yourself in their shoes. She says no. Because if you put yourself in their shoes, who is now in their shoes? You are. And the problem is, you will see the world through your bias. So let's say you are a young, single, high-performing individual. You move into management. Your attitude is, I work harder than anyone else, I show up early, I work late, and I expect nothing less. So now someone calls in sick because of their kid, their car, their air conditioning breaks, and if you put yourself in their shoes, you do this. Oh, okay, yeah, well, if I were that person, I would have come in early. If I were that person, I'd work harder. If I were that person. She said, David, you're not that person. You're trying to see the world through your lens, and that's not the way it works. Empathy is being them in their shoes. It is seeing the world through their perspective. What is their life situation? Are they a single parent? Are they going through financial trouble? Are they having to take care of their aging parents? Are their kids sick? Is their spouse ill? What is going on in their life? Understanding that not everyone is as driven and motivated as you, or they would be in a leadership role. She said, David, and this is one of the most powerful things she said to me, you know, you're dealing with people, not robots. You can't just flip a switch and they will act and behave the way you want them to. So what Mary did for me was gave me a totally different perception and perspective of how to look at the world. And instead of saying, why can't my employees change? The question is, how can I inspire them to change? And that's what totally changed my perspective and my perception of how leadership should and be. So what I did is I copied everything Mary told me, which I'm going to tell you about today. And what happened was, when I moved into that leadership role, I became the top performing team in the United States. All of the people who work for me to this day, years later, will say, David, you are the best leader I ever had. Now, I don't say that to impress you. It is to impress upon you. Everything I learned is not what I ever experienced. The way Mary trained me, the way she taught me, the things I'm sharing with you, it might sound obvious, but people don't do it. But the impact does what Mary did, and their teams will do anything for you, and that's what I wanted to learn. So over the years, I started studying and say, well, maybe I'm different, and Mary's different, so let me start interviewing. So I've interviewed over 3,000 people. I now have a podcast where I interview CEOs, and I share concepts that I learned from other high-performing teams. And I started researching and looking. Now, one of the first things I would do is understand why people were demotivated, why people wanted to quit their job. If you had to guess, based on thousands of interviews, what do you think the number one reason is why someone will quit their job?
Because they don't feel that they're heard.
Don't feel heard. Bad leadership. There's one word I hear all the time. Hate. Hate is the word that puts people over the edge where they quit. I hate my boss. And that is the word that I heard most common when someone actually finally pulled the trigger. I can't stand my boss. I hate my boss. I don't want to be there. Now, I also would interview people and they say, oh my gosh, I would never quit. What about for more money? Nope. Better benefits? Nope. Not quitting. Why? What do you think their number one answer was? Right? Love. Love my boss. What do you mean you love your boss? Love him. Why would I go anywhere else? I have the greatest place to work. I feel valued. I feel important. I feel listened to. I feel trust. And they're saying all these things that we wish we had as employees, no matter what level you're at. We wish we had it. So this is what I started to experience. Now I would ask managers, what's the hardest part of your job? Managers, leaders, what do you think people said is the absolute hardest part of being a leader or manager? People. Oh my gosh, people. They're so difficult. Oh, they're whining, they don't work hard, they show up late. If they would just be different. One common thing, they're always pointing the finger. Leaders are always pointing the finger at someone else. They never take responsibility for what they could do. They just wish people would be different, but they're people, they're not robots. Wishing them to be different doesn't change them. Flipping a switch doesn't change people. See, people are complicated. Kind of reminds me of this. You can't turn a cat into a dog. Now, those of you, if you read my book, you'll see this quote is in the book. It's on the cover of the book. You can't turn a cat into a dog. And some of you say, what do you mean you can't turn a cat into a dog? Well, let me ask you a question. Let's pretend you're really active. You love to walk, you love to run, you love to go to the park, you love to play catch, you love to throw balls, and you're gonna go buy a pet. What are you gonna buy? A cat, of course, you're gonna buy a cat. And you're gonna put Fluffy, a cat, right? So you get a cat, you put the cat on a harness, and you go, Fluffy, let's go for a run. And what's Fluffy doing? If Fluffy's not moving, then you take the ball and you throw the ball and you say, Fluffy, catch! And Fluffy goes. Darn, I wish that cat would like to run. I wish the cat would chase the ball. But we can't turn a cat into a dog. What they are is what they are. We could keep wishing, but we're just going to be mad. We're going to be frustrated. And that's what we do as leaders. We wish people were different, but we can't turn a cat into a dog. Now, I get it. Some of you are going to say, okay, so Dave, wait, let me see if I understand you. Really, what you're saying is get rid of the cat and get a dog. You have a bad employee, you have an employee, they don't work as hard as you want. I'm just going to get rid of them and I'll replace them. And I'll just find the perfect employee. How many of you have tried this to get a perfect employee? Raise your hand. How well is that working? It's hard. It's hard. Why can't you build a perfect team? Why can't you build a perfect team? People are what? People are not perfect. What else? You can't change people who don't want to be changed. Everyone's different. What's that? Lazy? Well, but so you find the perfect person who's not lazy. Why can't we do it? Well, let me give you an example. Pro sports. They try to build a perfect team. They can recruit from anywhere in the world, and they have millions of dollars to do it, and they can't do it. They can't. You can't build a perfect team, even with millions of dollars. Also, think about this. Let's say you love Patrick Mahomes, right? Let's say hey, easy. Bo Nix, I'm in Denver. But let's say there's a quarterback you love. They're like, oh my gosh, they're the greatest ever. Why can't you get them here? Who says they want to come here? You might want them, but you can't afford them, or they're happy where they are. So we can't build perfect teams. So the reality is, what is the solution then? If we can't build a perfect team, if we can't find a perfect team, what we need to do is look at leadership differently, and this is what Mary taught me. So it's a 180-degree approach. Now, to make it real simple for my presentations, I break it down to 3 letters, MVP. M, mindset. V, value them. P, push them up. What do I mean by this? Well, mindset. Mindset means we change our mindset about leadership. And there's 2 aspects of leadership that I learned that I had to learn how to do to be better. Number 1 is I had to look at how I view my team, and the other is how I view myself as a leader. So let's talk about this. Mindset of the team. It all starts with setting a mindset for the team. And the way you do that is you define a culture. Most companies, most organizations, and most individuals, if you're in a leadership role, don't take the time to literally get a piece of paper out and say, these are the values, this is the culture I want for my immediate team. Even if I'm not a CEO or president, I'm just, maybe I'm a supervisor. But you sit down and you say, what do I want? How do I want my team to act and behave toward each other, toward our clients, our customers, our residents, our tenants, our vendors, our partners? How do I want everyone to operate? Now, this is just an example. I want them to take ownership. I want them to be accountable for their decisions. I want them to be respectful of each other at work and outside of work. I want them to have strong work ethic. I want them to feel a safe environment. I want them to make a safe environment for each other. That's an example of creating a culture. So when I first became a manager, this is what I did. I wrote out a list of 4 key things, and I said, this is how my team operates. I don't care about the rest of the company. I do, but I mean, what I meant is they didn't do this, so I did. And this is what we did. Now, the number one concern that people have, that I've seen, is they don't do it. And if they don't create the culture, if you don't proactively define how we plan to operate as a team, then a culture automatically is getting created. And typically, in most organizations I've worked with, Toyota, Caterpillar, the EPA, small business, if we don't create a culture in our own little team, a culture is created and it tends to be dysfunctional because the loudest people, the complainers, tend to dominate the culture. So that's the number one thing. We have to be careful of it. And then once we define a culture, we have to live it. We need to exude it as a leader. That's the first thing in MVP, mindset. Now, I'll give you a great example, which is right here in Texas. When Southwest Airlines first started, Herb Kelleher, his belief is, this is the love airline, right? That's why they call it Love Field in Dallas. It's the love airline, and his whole thing is, you love your people. You love your people. And so he always said, your employees come first. Employees always come first. Now, the stock market investors hated this. No, we come first. He said, no, if I take care of my employees first, they're going to take care of my customers, and if we take care of the customers, guess what? People are going to buy. And for years, they were one of the top performing, profitable businesses in the airline industry. Now, I will tell you, things have changed. Things have changed. Because now investors came in and they flipped it upside down and they go, no, we're not doing that. It's all about the money. We got to make money first. And so do any of you work for Southwest? I mean, you might, part-time flight attendant or something, right? Do you? But I've flown about 1.5 million, 2 million miles on Southwest. And I will tell you, I talked to flight attendants and pilots and they said it's different. It's not the way it was. So the new culture coming in is changing. The old culture still believes this. So that's how critical this is and the impact it can make. So as we look at culture, one way to look at that is instead of changing your perception, right? This is all about perception. Instead of looking at things of, I can't do that, an employee comes to you, I can't do it, we can't do it. The new mindset is, well, how can we? How can we do it? And so we shift our perception and we get different results. Now, real quick before I go on, would you guys like a copy of all my slides? Yes. Would you like that? All right. At the end, have your phone ready. I'm going to have you scan a QR code and you'll be able to download this, a culture worksheet for your team, not your company, your team. Some of my favorite books that you probably have never read on leadership, and all of my slides. So you'll have all these, so you don't have to worry about notes. Cool? All right. Second part, adjusting your own mindset. Now, let me ask a question, and I'd like all of you to answer. Shout out your answer. What was your very first exposure ever to leadership or management? First ever. How about your parents? Right, parents. Would you agree? Hands up. Would you agree? First, right? That's leadership, right? Question: How many of you had a curfew? Show hands. Oh, most of you. What happened if you were late for curfew? Oh, yeah. Yeah. What if you didn't do your chores? Yeah. So we start to see a pattern from a very young age that when we don't do what we're told to do, typically we get in trouble of some sort. Yes? Would you agree? Say yes. Yeah, most of the time. What was your next exposure to leadership? School, teachers, right? Coaches. What happened if you were a bad kid? What happened in school? Detention or expelled, suspended, right? How many of you played high school sports? Raise your hand. High school sports. Okay. What happened if you're late to practice? Running laps or benched. Are you seeing a pattern? You don't perform, you don't do what you're supposed to do. What do? You get zapped. You get in trouble, right? What was your next exposure in your life to leadership? Work. And where did your first manager that you work for learned leadership? Someone else, parents, school, coaches. And so we get this pattern of behavior and we just do what we know. And that's the way I was managed for my first 7 managers. You're just managed from what you know. And they were managed from what they knew. And someone eventually, right, they just found out if I get the whip out, you'll work harder. But I didn't like that. When I was 32, I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I thought, I'm not being inspired, I'm being threatened. And Mary never did. She never threatened, ever. So people felt safe. So what is the new mindset then? The new mindset is, instead of threatening, how do I take responsibility to build my people up? How do I coach and mentor them? How do I make them better? Now, quick question, why don't we do this? Why don't we do it? Why don't we coach and mentor and develop our people? We don't have time. I don't have time to do that. I've got my own job to do. I mean, come on, seriously? That's why I hire good people. I don't need to tell them what to do. Can you imagine the Texans? Can you imagine, or those of you in the Dallas area, the Cowboys, can you imagine they hire the best players in the world to play football, and the coach says, yeah, I don't need to coach you. That's why I hired you. You guys just go on the field and play, we'll win a Super Bowl. I'm going to go do my own business. No, that's correct. What is your job? What is your job? You're the coach, you're the leader. Your job is to get work done through others. That's the new mindset I had to learn. My job is to get work done through others, because if I could do it all myself, I don't need you. Think of a symphony orchestra conductor, 100-piece instrument, right? You have 100 instruments that need to be played. That conductor can't play them all. Can't play any. Well, he can probably play them, but so what do? I have to get work done through others. I create music, that's what football teams and baseball teams and hockey, we create by coming together. But for some reason, in the business world, leaders, supervisors often have this mindset of, I don't have time to do that. But that's your job. Now, this is why I do workshops. This is why companies like Toyota have me come in to look at, all right, how do we shift it? How do we make those changes so that I'm able to spend the time leading? And that's the hard part. That's the work that has to be done. So what I'm sharing with you today is, it's simple but not easy, right? The main thing is knowing we're dealing with people, not robots. Now, what's a new mindset? This is a mindset that I took on very early in my career. The mindset is, I am lucky. You are lucky your employees chose to work for you. Think about that. You should be lucky that they're working for you and not someone else. I am lucky they work for me. Hang on. I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, Dave, hang on. They're lucky to have a job. Imagine my wife was up here with me right now. So my wife and I are going to be celebrating our 34th wedding anniversary this year. Thank you. We got married when we were 2. If you're just doing how much gray I have. So imagine my wife is up here and I say, honey, this is incredible. This has been the most incredible 34 years of my life. And I just have one thing to tell you. You're so lucky I chose you. I felt a little vomit come up. Did you? I know that's gross. But isn't that gross? That line alone just made you cringe. But we do it to employees. We don't say it, we think it. That's why this is all about mindset. Imagine they were volunteers. Imagine all of your employees were volunteers. You couldn't fire them, you couldn't put on a performance plan, you couldn't threaten them, and you're stuck with them. That's a volunteer workforce. So if you had a volunteer workforce, those of you that volunteer, you work at some organization, people stay because of the mission. That's why culture, you got to find your mission. And they stay because they're treated well. If they're not treated well, why would you stay? So we shift our mindset and say, how do I think like a volunteer leader? How do I get people, how do I inspire them to want to work hard? How do I inspire them to want to show up? How do I inspire them to want to go the extra mile without me having to tell them to do it? And that's what this teaches us, right? If you can't inspire them, if you can't fire them, inspire them. Now let's talk about V, value, the second one. Valuing your people. Starts with empathy, right? Mary taught me this. She said, David, I just believe everyone walks around with a giant S on their chest. I said, super? She says, special. People just want to feel special. Goes back to when they're a child. So you tap into that. How do I make you feel special? I sit next to you, a total stranger on an airplane. How do I make you feel special? It's what I do. Now, it's genuine. It's not phony. But I literally, it's so ingrained in me now, it's like, how do I make you walk away and feel special? Because then you walk away and you just go, oh my God, that was the most amazing conversation. And I don't do any of the talking. They just felt special because they felt heard, safe, trusted. So I do that with my employees. You make them feel special. Now, how do we make them feel special? Starts with asking, how can I make them feel special? It just starts with that little question. How can I? What happens is when you ask a question, your brain automatically looks for an answer. How do I make them feel special? You say it every single day. How do I make them feel valued? And your brain will start firing off ideas. One way is just thank them. Thank them for working for you and not a competitor. Thank you for working for you and not somewhere else. Think about how much time people spend at your job. They wake up in the morning at, let's say, 6:30 for you. If it was Sunday morning, they'd be sleeping in. They're only waking up for you that are leaders, right? They're waking up for you. They're getting ready for you. They're commuting, if you're lucky, only half an hour, for you. And then they're putting in a full day of work for you. And then they finally get to go home for themselves. How much time are they spending with their own family? What would you guess? How many hours a day would you guess? 4, 3. It's usually in that 3 to 4. So they're spending 11 hours for you and only 3 or 4 for their family. That's a huge commitment. So when Mary taught me this, she goes, David, that's the first thing I do is I just value and recognize and thank them. I said, that's a commitment you're making. Thank you for being with me for 11 hours, not your family. I know it's a sacrifice. And they feel special. They feel valued. She would learn about their interests. I would learn about my employees' interests. What do they love to do? What are their hobbies? How do I support that? I would learn about their family, their kids, their moms, their dads, their whatever. Now, some of you might say, Dave, this sounds so touchy-feely, it doesn't work in our business. Well, this is Carl. Carl used to run a battalion in the Army, 300 men. Everywhere he's worked at Johnson & Johnson, he's worked in tech companies, he worked in healthcare. Everywhere he's worked, he has been a top performer. He has turned things around and done things that no other manager has ever done. And I had the opportunity to interview one of my thousands of interviews. I got to interview Carl, and I said, Carl, what is your secret? Why does everyone want to work for you? Why is performance so great? And he described Mary. He basically said everything that Mary said to me. And then he told me a story. He said, one of the things I always like to do also is I always send holiday cards. I always send anniversary cards. I always send birthday cards. I recognize when they started at the job, when their wedding anniversary is, their birthday, their kids. He says, I send handwritten cards. In fact, he shared this with me. He said, we have an annual event where all the spouses or significant others are invited. Raise your hand if any of you have an event where like spouses are invited. Raise your hand, anyone? All right, some of you. So they had their conference in Florida. He would sit in the airport the entire day while the employees were flying in with their spouses or significant other. And he would greet every single employee. But before this day, he would do all of his homework and prep and learn about that employee and something that they had done that was special. And at the airport, when he greeted them, hey, thank you so much for all you did this year, he would make sure he turned to the spouse. And he would say, and I need to especially thank you. Because of your support at home, I know this employee would not be able to do what they do. And he would name some of the accolades in front of the spouse of what that employee did. And they're blown away like, how does he know that? You know, he's a VP at a billion-dollar company, right? How does he know that? So then I asked Carl, I said, so what happens the next day? He says, usually the employee comes in and says, Carl, I'm mad at you. What do you mean? Well, I'm lying in bed with my spouse last night. She turns over to me and she says, Carl's awesome. You better get your tush out of bed early and you better be at work on time. You got to work harder for Carl because he's amazing. And you better not blow this opportunity. And what it did is it created what we call social proof, where you validate that you work for an amazing individual in an amazing company. And that was part of Carl's secret, right? He always thanked their spouse. Now, some people still say, oh, but Dave, I don't know, that doesn't work. I'm union, I'm, you know, blah, blah, blah. This is Mike Abrashoff. He's the commander of the USS Benfold. When he took over, this is in the early 90s, the Benfold was the worst performing ship ever in the history of the Navy since like the 1920s. It was horrible. They hated the outgoing commander. He comes in, turns the entire thing around in 18 months. They become the #1 performing battleship in the history of the Navy. All of the problems went away. Performance, infighting, racism, like everything went away. And the morale was the best they've ever seen. He's written a book. You look at the book, you read the book, guess what it says? Be like Mary. No, it didn't say that. But it's the same ideas. It's the same ideas. So it works everywhere. But the #1 secret here, folks, is it's got to be sincere. It's got to be sincere. This is not phony, it's phony baloney. Now, finding value is really hard, you guys. This is not easy. Let's do a quick couple activities here. I want you to take a look at this. Just take a look at it for a minute. What do you notice? G is missing. I had a mom come up to me. She goes, David, she was crying. She came up to me at the end of one of my presentations, and she said, you know, this doesn't just apply at work. This applies at home. I said, yeah, it does. The way we are with our family, our kids. She says, my 5-year-old kid came home one day. He had just learned how to write the alphabet. He was so excited. Mommy, 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 I just learned how to write the alphabet. Look. And he writes out the alphabet for her, and she said she looked down at it and said, yeah, but honey, you missed a letter. And his joy goes to sorrow instantaneously. And she realized, I didn't even look at the fact that he got 25 right. All I did was find what was wrong. Do we do that with people? Yeah, part of it is the way our brain is wired. There's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. Have you heard this? This is the science portion of today's presentation. This is the part of the brain that goes on high alert to find what you're looking for or thinking about. Best example, do you ever buy a car and then when you're driving, you start to notice how many other people drive the same type of car you just bought? They have the same car. Oh my gosh, they have the same car. Everyone's driving the same car I drive. How is that? You're just aware of it, right? Now this is tough. Let's do another little activity here. I want you to think of someone, they don't have all of these traits, but I want you to think of someone in your mind you really don't care for. Or maybe they drive you nuts. Or maybe you're angry at them. Now, this doesn't have to be at work. This could be an ex. But it's got to be someone you know. It's got to be someone you know, right? You actually have to know them personally. It could be a neighbor, it could be an ex, it could be a family member, an in-law, it could be a sibling. But I want you to think of someone, I want you to get really clear of who they are. Right? Are you really clear? Everyone really clear? Okay. If you have a piece of paper, let's do this. Write down their initials. Write down their initials. Okay? Now, if they're sitting next to you, don't write their initials. Let's not go there. All right. Everyone, raise your hand if you got someone in mind. Seriously, you gotta have really clear. Think of someone you know. And don't say there's no one I don't like. Come on, there's gotta be someone in your life. All right. All right. Here's what I want you to do. Very quickly. If you have a piece of paper, do it on paper. If you don't have paper, I want you to do it quickly in your head. I want you to write down 3 good things about that person. Go. Go. Okay, just stop. Hang on. Let me put you out of your misery. Be honest. Raise your hand if that was difficult. Be honest. So the majority. Why was that hard? Because I'm only focused on the negative. I don't want to find something good about them. There's nothing good about them. You realize their moms would still find something good about them, right? I mean, here's the thing. It becomes hard because we're so focused on what's wrong with people. Like once we make a judgment, we have an idea what we don't like, all of a sudden that's all we start seeing, right? Let's do another activity. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds. I want you to count how many number 3s you see on this screen, okay? So I'll give you about 10 seconds. Ready? And don't say the answer out loud when we're done. Just keep it to yourself. Ready? Just count how many number 3s. All right, how many did you come up with? 14. There were actually 13. Woohoo! Okay, that's pretty good. Okay. Wait a minute. How many were orange? How many of all the numbers on that screen were orange? How many orange numbers were there? Now, I know, sneaky. So hang on. All right, so there is a term, there was a scientist at Harvard that did research on this. It's called inattentional blindness. And the idea behind inattentional blindness is when you are focused on one thing, you don't see other things. When you are focused on what you don't like, guess what you're blind to? What's good? This took me a lot of practice and a lot of time to shift my perception, where I had to say, what's good about them? What's good about them? Sitting on an airplane, I'm sitting next to you. What's good about this person? And when I started shifting my perception, guess what I started to see? What was good? Guess what became blind to me? All their problems. What I didn't like. This person sitting next to me. Oh my gosh, this employee. So shifting, it's not easy, simple but not easy. But it starts with this, how can I, right? How can I do it? And just recognizing that they're people, they're not robots, right? That's the real key. All right, let's go to the last section, and then we're going to wrap up. Push them up. P means push them up. Push them up starts with looking at how can I inspire my people better. And what do I mean by push them up? Push them up means help them achieve their goals. And in order to achieve their goals, we have to know what their goals are. We need to talk to them. We need to meet with them. We need to say, what do you care about? And help them get to where they want to go. Now, some people will say to me, Dave, no. The problem is, if I help you get better, you're going to take my job. It's the number one reason people don't help their people get better. They're afraid. But here's the reality. What is going to happen if you help them get better? What's going to happen? Well, a rising tide lifts all boats. You're responsible. And that's what Mary found. That's what Carl found. That's what Mike Abershaw found. That's what I found. When you drive your team to success, you get the accolades. So a rising tide lifts all boats. But it all starts with this shift in perception to do it. Now, people say to me, and I've heard this before, David, this was really good. You know, I know this. I've heard this before. It's a really good reminder. What I always say is, but are you doing it? Because it's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know. And that's the real thing. It's learning how to take action. Now, I want to wrap up very quickly with a story, one last story about Shirley, my mom. You heard what Shirley overcame. You heard how tragic loss of her parents, her husband. You heard how she had to raise 3 kids on her own, pay off a massive amount of debt. I mean, she really struggled. And I realized the real secret to my mom was her mindset. Now, even though my mom had a great mindset, she went on to live many, many years after. Eventually, she got cancer, lung cancer. Now, she had quit smoking 30 years earlier, but the damage was already done. And even though the damage was done, we eventually had to move her into hospice. I remember sitting with my mom. We're in a quiet room all by herself. I'm holding her hand, and I look at my mom and I said, "You are such an inspiration. Everything you've done," I said, "your heart, your grit, your strength, your courage, but it's really all about your mindset, Mom." She smiled back at me, clear-eyed, squeezed my hand, and said, "David, I'm so proud of the man you've become." She says, "I want you to remember this, though. You get what you look for. So look for the good." 2 days later, she passed. I've thought about that moment more times than I can count, because in that one moment, my mom wasn't just talking about positivity, she was handing me a lens, really a way of seeing, a different perception. And what she was really saying is, what you look for and what you focus on is what you're going to find. Folks, that's what this is really about today. Yes, it's leadership, but it goes well beyond that. It's learning how to really shift your perception. Because whatever you focus on, and when you shift your perception, that becomes your reality. But it's hard. But it's learning how to shift your perception. And learning, this idea that what you choose, what you see. It's a choice, right? It is absolutely a choice. But it all starts with these 3 words. In fact, as we wrap up here, can I have all of you stand up? All right, everyone, when I point at you, I want you all to read or say, "How can I?" Ready? How can I? Oh, you guys are awesome. So the reality is asking, how can I lead with more heart? How can I be a leader who inspires? How can I find the good in people, in work, in life? And how can I be the reason someone believes in themselves even more? Because leadership isn't just about having the answers, folks. It's about having the courage to look at the hard stuff, the obstacles, the overwhelm, the uncertainty, and asking these 3 words. Thank you very much.